Oh, and I forgot to mention, Brendan, is after I stop recording, just don't like go out for like about a minute so that it'll just like refresh your audio.
Okay.
Sweet. All right. All right. We are here tonight on Left of the Projector. I'm your host, Evan, and I'm joined by Mike, who is from the Turn Leftist podcast, and Brandon from Cars and Comrades. Thank you both for joining.
How's it going?
Oh yeah, happy to be here.
Yes, yes. I think I forgot to say what movie we're doing, which is The Thing,
Hell yeah.
which would be helpful to people who are listening. I guess you can see the Spotify or whatever title will tell you. But this is a classic 1982 horror thriller, whatever you want to call it, John Carpenter. And it's always been one of my favorite movies. Although I got into an engagement or a conversation with someone who told me that it was like a boring dude bro snooze fest. And I'm like, it's a lot of dudes and it's a lot of, slow moving psychological paranoia.
Yeah, I mean, dude, bro, sure. Snooze Fest. I don't know. Like, did they just not like suspense movies? Like, I
They're
do.
like a horror fan. They're like their favorite movie is Scream.
Then no, that's bullshit. That's stupid. Scream sucks.
Yeah, this person just has bad opinions, I think. It's fine, you're allowed to, I mean.
Like, I'm realizing that I'm like getting to that age as like I'm turning 40 later this year. So like I'm basically that old guy who's just likes the stuff that from when I was young, and that's fine. Like I let people like what they like, but if your favorite movie is Scream, then I don't respect your opinion.
I mean, speaking of like turning 40, I also saw this movie when I was very young. And so there are like two ways that I saw this movie. When I was a really little kid and saw it in snippets because it was like way beyond my years for what I should have been seeing at that time. Because this is like a fucking terrifying movie for a little kid. Like the graphics and
Sure.
I mean, like the special effects and everything, and the monster and the way it just like subsumes all these other creatures is like really top notch, I think, for like the quality of the horror, I guess. But then I would see it more recently as an adult, but then I think I always had like a smartphone at the time, so I'm always like looking at it. And then like to this person's credit, at least, like I will bolster their point, like saying that it may be a snooze fest. At least in some aspects, is that there are a lot of characters. Like there are a lot of these dudes, and I don't know all their names, even after having seen this movie like a dozen times at this point. And I was watching it again today and noticing that like I don't know the order of the characters and like which they die. Even after watching it again today, I still don't like. It's kind of just like a mishmash of like who gets it when, and yeah, none of them are particularly important except for of course, Kurt Russell and some of the other main characters. But yeah, I mean, so they have something to their credit in that, and then there were even still plot points like things that happened in the movie today that I noticed and like kind of forgot. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that like that happened at all. So yeah, I mean, not that it's a boring movie. It's just like it is a decent horror movie. I guess I'm just more surprised that anybody took the time to hate it because at worst, I always thought it was just like kind of a middling movie. You know,
Yeah.
it's fine. Like,
I don't know if this is top 5 favorites or top 3. I know it's not my number 1, but like this is one of my favorite movies of all times.
really,
And like yeah, I get that it's like sparse on plot, but like yeah, if you can't remember like order that characters died, that's reasonable because there are characters whom you don't know when they die.
mm.
Like that's a
That's
big
also
part of it.
true.
Like yeah, okay, fair enough. I don't remember anyone in the characters' names except McCready. Um but like yeah, I tried to rewatch this last night and it just did not pan out. So like everything's not super fresh for me. But yeah, like the whole point of the movie is that like most of the time you really don't know which one of the characters are actually still alive and which aren't.
True, true, true.
Yeah.
Like even with intentional misdirects, like when I can't remember who it was, but somebody finds McCready's coveralls that were intentionally placed to be like a red herring, and so then they're all when he is the last one standing, like at the end, like he's one of the only like definitely humans in the movie. So yeah, it's intentionally confusing as to when people died.
It's funny you say that, Brendan, because I was reading something that John Carpenter says where apparently he tried to make it seem a little ambiguous at the end whether or not McCready was or wasn't, an alien at that point. And he's like, when they ask him, like, who is it? He's like, I will never tell.
No, I thought it was the other guy that
It's
for the
McCready
love.
and Childs are the only two left standing.
Yeah,
at the
Child,
end.
the guy
Yeah,
played by Keith David.
Yeah,
who's in, like, a bunch of
I was
movies.
always under the impression that everybody thought that he was like potentially the
I did
monster.
too.
What's funny is that they share a drink at the end, so it doesn't really matter. They both are.
True.
It's the very last thing they do. They both share that drink off the JB bottle, and they laugh about it. It's like, okay, I guess you guys are both just giving up. But they also are literally talking about how even if they are both human, they're not getting the fuck out of there anyway. And they're like, well, maybe we shouldn't. Like, they both are just kind of giving up and kind of resigning themselves to it. So it almost doesn't matter who is or isn't. Like,
Well, the fact that they're also letting themselves, killing themselves over it, you could say, would it allow that to? I mean, I guess it didn't really have a choice. It being, the thing. But I guess it doesn't matter. But I mean, to the point of like it being like a boring movie, I would say absolutely not. Is it like a slightly slow build? Absolutely, but I think that's what makes it so good too.
Again, that's the way writing, editing, and everything was in that era, though. Like anyone who said that movie is boring, God help them if they watch anything from the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
yeah, true. This came out in '82.
Yeah, it's funny.
So
it's
before
funny.
Red Dawn, 2 years before Red Dawn, to be fair.
Yeah, so that's the one thing that I was thinking of, kind of on the the plot of this movie. Again, pretty straightforward. The opening shot I think is always pretty cool, with the dog running, the Norwegian helicopter trying to catch it, which we of course realize is the thing, and it can morph into different people, and like you're following it, kind of the trajectory of it being a dog to another dog, and it spreads itself throughout. And so I'm thinking to myself, Cold War era, obviously unintentionally or not, this movie has that sense of Cold War era, Soviet versus the US. This is an American military, I guess it's not military, research base, in Antarctica. Is the thing like the threat of communism, which is sort of, obviously this is me putting this meaning into it. I'm sure John Carpenter had 0 to probably 0% chance of actually politicizing this movie in any way. I think you were saying that before, Brendan. So do you think that makes sense?
Yeah. John Carpenter's so funny. Like he was largely apolitical, like we discussed before. But I like watched a few interviews with him to try and like suss out any sort of things that he might have like intended, like anything political, and I couldn't find anything. But just watching three or four interviews with John Carpenter, it's really funny because he seems a lot more like he should be fixing my car than directing a movie.
That's funny.
Like, not even just his appearance, like his whole vibe, like just is he's got the vibe of like blue collar director. Like, not that it comes across in any of his movies or anything, just a funny thing I think about him. Like, he does seem like he would be probably moderately progressive, but he's definitely, like, I don't think he was really trying to put anything political into, like, short of They Live, which you've already discussed.
Yeah. I've seen like a few quotes where he got angry that people were using They Live and comparing it to like Trump era, but he didn't actually come out as being specifically like anti-Trump or like pro-Hillary or whatever. It was just kind of like he's clearly holding whatever his beliefs are to himself. Let his movies stand for themselves.
Or he's just not someone who has a lot of like political leanings and isn't going to try and get wrapped up in stuff that he's not educated on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't love that position, but I like it a lot more than like a liberal who will, like defend Ukraine to the death or something. Like, I would rather have a John Carpenter than Mark Hamill.
I mean, John Carpenter could be even like somewhat radical in his beliefs, but like it could even be in like a libertarian way when you look at things like They Live or whatever. But yeah, I would imagine he's probably like, another Hollywood like liberal lefty leaning at least, but then probably have some libertarian issues as well, because I mean, there's got to be some subversive element to his politics for from the movies he makes to begin with. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Well, so I think. Oh, what was I saying? But is it going too far? I mean, on this podcast, I've done movies that are complete trash ish movies that have no political statement. And I'm like injecting something that I want to put into the movie because it's fun to do so. And I'm thinking, you know, people at this time literally saw communists as like an evil monster that was gonna, their friend could be a communist, and they would. I don't know. There's like paranoia over communism at the time with all of
Was
the
it
communist,
infectious? You might say.
right? So is
It was
like
more like a
did you
fire
feel
that
like
was spreading.
yeah? Well, I just think about like the paranoia in the movie of everyone has about each other. No one trusts anyone anymore. Not to say that's the same as people not trusting someone because they might be a communist or
See,
whatever.
I like to read that in and almost inversely. Instead of thinking like it's these people paranoid that they've been infiltrated by communists, I like to think that it's a bunch of communists worried that they're paranoid they've been infiltrated by the FBI.
Well, there that they
Like
that was
for me, the whole movie works as a metaphor of like a leftist group falling apart and eating itself because they
Wow.
can't figure out who the Fed is.
Damn.
that would make you paranoid. That's for sure.
Oh, it does. We've seen it firsthand.
I mean, just how many groups have they infiltrated? It's we don't have time to list them all here.
Yes, for sure. I mean, and again, they look just like you. They could be anyone. It's like,
It could be your dog. You never know.
it could be.
FBI dogs. They got like FBI robot dogs now, so right or
That's why I have cats. You know, they're not going to narc on you.
never.
I mean,
They would never make a robot cat.
There's something to be said for the thing breaking down hierarchies because when it gets there, it's very clear that, like, I think the old guy with the gun, I can't remember his name, but he's the guy in
Wilford
charge. Right?
Brimley.
No, not even him. It's
Oh,
the guy who like is the only guy wielding the pistol all the time.
oh, right. Yeah, the doctor.
Fuck, I can't even find him on the
Was it Fuchs? No.
let me see if I could.
I've seen this movie a dozen times, and I'm like always terrible at remembering who's who exactly in terms of the characters because I do feel like it's like chaotic quickly. I mean, you have the beginning where everyone's kind of enjoying their liquor, and Kurt Russell McCready is pouring booze on his computer because it beats him in chess and shit. So there's lots of everyone is very lonely and very individual. Everyone is kind of there for themselves, which I think is also what leads to their paranoia of anyone. There's no like real friendship or camaraderie amongst any of them.
You know, and I can't count how many times I have watched this movie, and I've never quite put my finger on that. But yeah, that's true. It's a group of individuals, but they're not like working together. Like like the thing is basically a collection of cells, but it's working collectively. Like
One communicative goal, like
yeah. Yeah, oh man, that is a good good reading of that because it's like when you think about communism versus like American capitalism where it's just hyper individualistic. I love reading like the thing they analyze is like these individual cells that are working like together, and it's taking over this group of people who are all there kind of together by themselves.
yeah.
I
No,
love
that was
that.
actually the only thing that I said to Evan before the show was I took away from the message from the movie that individualism was the worst enemy that these guys were up against out in this hellscape. Like in addition to being in Antarctica, but that's like the whole thing about it. It's like you're as separated as you can possibly be. And then to compound on that, you may be a group, but you cannot trust anyone. So the only person that you know is not the thing is yourself, and everyone's completely alone. And I said to Evan, it's like if only they'd had some kind of systems of accountability in place for emergencies that don't require trust, that allow everyone to be like held to account very publicly, even if they don't value privacy in like an emergency situation, like that could have been implemented. And it's like and like in parentheses, scary authoritarianism, like whatever would be the most terrifying for these freedom-loving Americans at that time. And of course, you can easily relate it to COVID and say, like, you can handle it the way that the scary countries did and then not have a lot of deaths, or you can handle it the way that all the free countries did and lose a bunch of people who don't make it. It's like, yeah, if only there were those systems in place, and if only you could behave in a decisive way and act very, what may seem rashly, but maybe effectively in that kind of situation. And for that, you kind of need central planning in a way that was not able to happen there. Like, it was a complete breakdown of authority. It's like, and in that way, McCready becomes the guy, even though he's just like the fucking pilot. He just was the most capable all the time. So he's like the de facto leader throughout the whole movie for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that ties perfectly into them all being kind of, they don't care about the group at all. They're individually, like, they're hanging out playing poker. They're friends with each other because they're all there together. But on top of this, also, is they're also so super secluded. I mean, I can't imagine being in the middle of Antarctica or like some place far off, and the only people you see are these like 12 people constantly, and you can't really leave very easily. Your mental state would be pretty diminished. So to not have something in place to enable you to solve a crisis, the only thing that they could agree on was like spraying things down with either the flamethrower or the fire, not the fire hydrant, what the fuck are they called?
Oh, the fire extinguisher?
Fire extinguisher. Like, that was the only collective little thing they had going.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've always like, okay, I'm changing the subject a little bit, but this is a thing that I have been confused about for as long as I've been watching this movie as an adult. This is a research facility, right?
Yep.
Are any of them researchers? It's like there's the radio guy, there's helicopter pilot, there's doctor, which you could argue researcher for doctor, but I think he's there as a medical professional. Like, it really seems like maybe 90% support staff and like one or two researchers tops.
This is a cook as well. And you have the guy who sort of like is originally the de facto leader, but he doesn't really do anything. Well, I can't think of
Oh, Gary. And it's I did find
yes.
him in the IMDb. Something Moffat.
Yeah, Donald Moffat. But yeah, like, he's like the leader, but he's not a researcher. Like, there's Dr. Cooper. And then I think there's one other guy who seems to like occasionally have some.
Wilford Brimley's character was also, I think, I can't remember what his name was.
Dr. Blair.
Yeah, Blair.
Yes. Right. So there's only two people that have actual. So really, it's two dudes doing some research. What are they researching there? Ice?
I mean, I know that there's like real research that goes on in Antarctica,
Of course,
and
I'm
I
just
don't.
being a dick.
Yeah, but like, yeah, it does seem like, and I know that's probably just padding out the numbers so that they can have maximum carnage in the movie. It just, that's the one thing that I can say, like, oh, if I directed this movie and was a competent director, I would have made it exactly the same, except at least half of the staff would have been actual researchers.
Well, I think it almost makes it, if you had more researchers, you'd think in theory it would have been easier for them to kind of figure out something was going on sooner. I don't know, like having no research there, they're like, what the hell do we even do? Like, they're not prepared. So that kind of, I don't know if, well,
hell, it would have helped if they had the ability to communicate with the Norwegians at the fucking neighboring base, so that they could have said in Norwegian, "Hey, shoot that dog right fucking now and just end this whole thing right now." Like, but any kind of preparation at all would have been good. But yeah, I mean, I also got the impression, you mentioned, Evan, that because they're in this desolate atmosphere, they only see each other, that they could be on edge to begin with. But I just kind of always had the impression that they were recently arrived to the base. I guess it may just be that there had not been enough exposition at the beginning showing these guys in their doldrums and cabin fever. Like, it was just very quick. Like, the only thing you see is like Kurt Russell dumping his liquor into the only fucking chess computer they have. It's like, dude, that's very short-sighted of you. You're gonna be here a while. Like,
it could have been they just got there. I mean, they mentioned that they can't leave at some point until I guess spring, like the winter is over. So presumably you would come like before winter and then you would leave after, I'm guessing. So yeah, I mean maybe they were just there. I don't know.
Yeah, like it didn't seem especially like stir crazy ish. Because like like what's the one dude is just skating around and like listening to music. Everybody's like kind of like doing their own thing, but like nobody's like coming apart at the seams.
They all seemed very comfortable, like routines for sure, but not like on it. I mean, maybe there were certain things that they were doing, like when the guy refuses to turn off the radio and the other guy's like begging him to over the intercom, like turn that fucking thing down. The guy just doesn't. I thought that was really funny.
They still had a lot of booze and a lot of weed left, so clearly they weren't
Right,
running
they're
low
doing
on
okay.
supplies. Yeah, and I think Knowles is the character you're talking about, the one who was like skating around.
Yeah.
What was he? It's funny, like I didn't write that many notes down when I was one of them, but one of them was like, what were they researching? Was like one of the main thing I was thinking of, and then the other thing too is, they go back to the Norwegian base to like see what's up, and they didn't send. They sent the medical doctor and the pilot, which makes sense. They need the pilot to get them there. Why didn't they send? If they were really looking to see what happened, they would have sent an actual researcher.
At least one.
But no.
I would say that in that case, like they think that something like fucked up and catastrophic has happened. You don't need the geologist or iceologist or whatever the fuck like research people they have there. In that case, yeah, you need the pilot to get you there. The doctor seems like it would be high priority because if these people are like flying around in helicopters just shooting at animals, like being crazy and throwing hand grenades, then they're probably going there not like, oh, I wonder what they're researching, and more like, oh, I hope anybody's left alive.
Yeah. Yeah, they were
I guess
still
that's
cabin
true.
fever at that point.
Well, it did seem they like it seems like implied that the Norwegians, I don't know, like their research place seems smaller, like when they're walking around it, and it seemed more sciency. I don't know. And clearly they had done something. They had literally excavated this thing from the ice, which, at the time you don't really have any backstory. And actually it's a good point because you mentioned, Mike, that you watched the sequel, I think, or the prequel. I think Brandon, you
Yeah.
said you've seen it too.
The
I haven't seen
requel.
it, and the requel, which I think is cool. Carpenter had no part in it, but it doesn't mean it. You said it was like what, a fine movie, not good, not bad, but just fine.
That was
Middling, yeah.
decent. It introduced another plot point that I ended up kind of like retroactively applying to the 1982 version, which was that the thing can't replicate inanimate objects like inorganic materials. So people's titanium rods, their fillings, notably, is like a plot point in there. And so they use that as a test to see who is or is not the thing. And I remember thinking, I was talking to you about it before the recording. There's the one character who has like this really gaudy nose ring, and it doesn't even make sense for his character. It's just like looks weird on him. But then I thought that was going to be a thing later where he is conspicuously without it, and then people know that he's an alien. And then that doesn't happen at all. He's the guy who gets his hands just eaten by the chest cavity of the thing when he's trying to like resuscitate the guy. And it's just funny because it is like a major plot point in the prequel. And it's a good one too. I think it works very well for them.
I'm guessing Carpenter didn't even like consider that as a piece of it. He just like,
but then it also fits in perfectly because then it's funny to think that the Norwegians figured that out and then the Americans didn't, because that is what the prequel is. It's telling the story of the Norwegians at that base, and then it ends with the guy getting into the helicopter chasing after that dog that shows up at the American base. Like it's a perfectly, they recreate the shot and everything. It's very good.
What, Americans being second rate at their research?
It's because they were using the imperial system.
No, it's because the DoD picked all the scientists that went.
Yeah, they're there just to spy on the Norwegians. They weren't there to actually. I don't know. That actually might track. They're there just to kind of keep tabs on the other researchers.
So another cool point that I was watching some other support material, like there was some bits of like John Carpenter talking about the movie or just other horror fans talking about it, and they said that it's really cool that this monster has noticeably different like body parts from different creatures because it's been to thousands of different worlds already and replicated those creatures. So it's got tentacles and crab legs and all these other different things. And that's why like sprouts all those things from like a human head or whatever, and like does all these crazy. It's really cool in that way once you think about it, but like didn't occur to me until someone said it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard
that's
that before.
interesting. That's interesting because one of the it's actually like a good segue. The one of the I knew that this movie was not well liked when it came out. I mean, pretty much all of John Carpenter's movies were not uh well. I mean, I feel like Halloween is one of the few ones, but not at the time when it came out. It was kind of a
You want to hear, like, this is totally not the thing, but John Carpenter, do you want to hear my favorite not liked when it came out thing about John Carpenter?
Oh yeah, please.
When he did Assault on Precinct 13, when it went to be reviewed for its rating, they were like, yeah, this thing where you like cold-blooded kill a child, not gonna float, because there's a scene in the movie where a child's like buying ice cream from an ice cream truck and he gets shot dead. And so they were like, you have to remove that scene, and then the movie is good to go with whatever like PG-13 or R rating that it ended up getting. But like that scene was like a hard pass, no go, right? And so he was just like, yeah, no problem. And then just lied to them and said that it was removed and released them released the movie with the footage of the child being shot still in it.
They didn't even bother checking.
I mean, for all I know, he showed them a copy where it had been removed and then just did not distribute that copy.
That's funny. Well, the thing that, I mean, I think the review I read before, so it was from the New York Times from when it came out in 1982, and like I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's some part of it where he basically says, oh gosh, I had the part. I think there's a point in it where he's saying that like the shape of the thing and the fact that it has like all these tentacles and it can like move really fast like makes it super lame. But actually, in talking in what you said, Mike, that if like it has like a reasoning for that. Like I don't feel like John Carpenter does things related to like his creatures or like the specifics in the movie like on accident. You know, he has a purpose. Whether he's actually politicizing them, probably not. But he's clearly has a way he wants it to look.
I would say another argument against the idea that this was made with any sort of like political intention, like even though you can like, you know, the monster among us works as like a metaphor for like the attitude towards communism in the era. This is supposedly based very closely on a story that was written in like 1938. And so like you could easily make an argument that that was like, you know, within the scope of the Red Scare, but like, you know, it was different. Like the Red Scare and everything associated with it really like ramped up hard after World War II. Like so in 38, like, you know, I really don't know what the attitude in America was, but like it, at least superficially, we were allied with Russia. So,
well, and it's like, oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say I'm gonna completely change the subject. So
Well,
go ahead.
well, I'll just say this one thing. I was just going to say that, like in the 30s, especially, I don't know, we were talking about this maybe on one of the chats about how that was before movies, basically in the United States, were scrubbing out anything related to communism and well, I'm blanking on the name of the act that they basically passed, or not passed, but does anyone know what I'm talking about?
It's probably going to be some like HUAC thing, right, Brandon?
Yeah, fuck. I've had this conversation. I listened to a podcast about it. And I'm like screwing up here.
I'm sorry. Repeat what it was that you were.
Like, so like in around like 1936 or 1937, they basically created a law. I don't know if it was like an official law or like loosely official law to prevent like sex in movies, communism. Basically,
specifically in film.
Yes.
I really don't know anything about it.
I'm trying to. Oh, so I guess you were saying is like this. The original story is from the 30s.
Yeah, as soon as I said like I don't know where like the Red Scare wasn't really ramped up yet, I like a flood of everything I actually know about the era came back to me. It was like, no, we were hardcore. Like this country fucking hated communists. CP USA was actually probably among the strongest it's ever been around then. But like 38 specifically would have been a weird year because again, like World War II, like we were allied with Russia, and CPUSA was pro World War II, and a lot of people were joining the U.S. military because they thought that this could be like a turn for the U.S. military to go like do some anti-imperialism and beat down some fascists and just generally do good. And it caused like all sorts of like goofy shit to happen. Like honestly, it was probably like the last like the death knell of CPUSA. Like they did good stuff for decades afterwards, but it was always a fucking weird organization after that. But yeah, like in the 30s, like that was Joe Bob sheriff in the country, like running communists out of town or stringing them up. So it was not a friendly era. So yeah, that would actually be really curious to I look into the author of the original story that it was based on, because I have somehow I didn't think about this at all before I said it, and I have completely changed my mind. Like it is entirely possible that this short story was written about like the communists among us. I don't feel like it was, but it definitely could be.
Yeah. So so the thing that I was thinking of was called the Hayes Code.
Oh yeah.
So that was the piece, and I just looked up the guy you were talking about. So, well, I know you wanted to say something, Mike, but I'll just say, I was trying to find anything about the person who wrote the original story, but apparently he was like a science fiction writer, and he went to MIT, and so he was very into science and all these kinds of things. I don't know what his opinions were, but I think he might have been pro against segregation or pro segregation. I think. Well, scratch that.
No way, an anti-communist being pro segregation. I can't picture that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't have enough information to quickly scan this to see it. So you say what you're gonna bring up, Mike.
Well, I mean, to to go in like a completely different direction, like to take the opposite tack and say that, yeah, maybe the thing is a metaphor for communism, but in the opposite way, because it's like, so I remember hearing about like Genghis Khan from a fucking podcast. It was like through a Joe Rogan pipeline, and so I'm sure a lot of bros out there are familiar with it as well. But this whole podcast series talks very favorably about Genghis Khan and his effectiveness as a warrior and a leader. And one of the things they noticed that he would adopt anything that worked, and he was almost dialectical in that way. Like anything that he would take from his enemies that he conquered, whatever like maneuvers they would use or any kind of artillery, if it worked, they would take it in. It would become part of their culture as well. And that's kind of what the thing is as well. And people have always kind of been scared of that thing that subsumes and absorbs everything, regardless of like ideology or beliefs or anything. Like just or other qualifications or criteria. Just like it sucks you up into it, and there's nothing you can do about it, and that's very terrifying for people. But in that way, like I could almost make the case that the thing is dialectical, like the hot take that the thing is good, and like the capitalist individualists, like all they could do was burn everything down, including themselves. Like they ended up killing themselves at the end of it because it's the only thing they could do to beat that like immortal science of the thing that takes everything into it. And you could then make that case. I mean, if we want to talk about that relating to the struggle of imperialism versus capitalists threatening nuclear war to stop anti-imperialism, it's like you could definitely make that case.
So I had to tune out what you were just saying for a second because I found the Wikipedia article on the author of the original short story, and holy fuck. So the claim is that he just loved playing devil's advocate and would argue any position, even if he disagreed with it, if it meant for a livelier debate. A thing that maybe had validity at some point. We all know that, like, what the whole fucking devil's advocate thing looks like nowadays. It's just a bunch of Nazis arguing for Nazism, basically. It turns out in the 30s and 40s, it wasn't much different because there's just a whole bunch of quotes about him advocating for slavery under the guise of the devil's advocate. And apparently, this guy worked closely with L. Ron Hubbard to form what later became Dianetics.
Oh, Jesus.
So I wish I didn't know anything about this guy because this has now left a small, like, tainted residue on one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, that sucks. Not Dianetics, bro. Dialectics. You went with the wrong one.
He apparently he was like old school, like I think he was like early style libertarian, because there's a whole thing about how like anti-regulation and anti-government he was.
Fucking lame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and it's. I think that's funny. It says that he went to MIT, but in parentheses it says no degree because he didn't actually finish. I mean, I don't know why that's funny to me, but it is. And he also went to Duke University and got a degree. So, but I will say what you said, Mike, is that
MIT
makes
was
a
too
lot of-
liberal. I just wanted to say that real quick. That he had to go to Duke because they weren't indoctrinating him with like gender ideology or something.
Yeah, he needed Duke is the quintessential right wingy. The only thing worse than that would have been like Yale or something. But like the thing being good and being your view of it being like that's wait.
Oh fuck!
Dialectical.
I found something. I'm just gonna read this sentence direct from the assessment by peers section of his Wikipedia article. Are y'all ready for this? British science fiction novelist Michael Moorcock, which is just what a name, as part of his Starship Stormtroopers editorial, said Campbell's stories and its writers were wild-eyed paternalists to a man, fierce anti-socialists, with stories full of crew-cut, wisecracking, cigar-chewing, competent guys like Campbell's image of himself, who had success because their work reflected the deep-seated conservatism of the majority of their readers, who saw a Bolshevik menace in every union meeting. He viewed Campbell as turning the magazine into a vessel for right-wing politics. By the early 1950s, a crypto-fascist, deeply Philistine magazine pretending to intellectualism and offering idealistic kids an alternative that was, of course, no alternative at all.
Fuck.
Yeah, so apparently the author of the original short story actually stood a pretty good chance of writing this as a critique of communism.
Yeah.
So
Sounds about right.
Man, I wish I had done more research before coming on to this. It's been a hectic week for me.
no,
But
I feel bad that I didn't look into the story because I knew that it was one, but I didn't look into it. But actually, that all right. So
no,
you have
our
this-
joking assessment of this being anti-communist now stands to potentially just be on the nose.
So let me pose this question then. So you have the writer who writes the story in the 30s, is super fashy, anti-communist, sees the Bolsheviks as infiltrating America. So he creates this story. I haven't read the story, so it'll be interesting to see how close they are. So a thing which is clearly the Bolsheviks, communism, is infiltrating this group of scientists. Does John Carpenter make this movie knowing this information and then intentionally kind of making it apolitical to strip it from that initial meeting?
Well, so I've never seen the original, The Thing from Another Planet.
Me either.
But I saw an interview with John Carpenter where he explicitly said that when he was approached to remake The Thing from Another Planet, and that it was one of his favorite movies, so he didn't want to like try his hand at actually just a straightforward remake. So he went with something closer to the original short story, so that he didn't feel like he was stepping on the original movie.
Oh, that's worse. Oh fuck. That's. I mean, but that doesn't necessarily mean. Oh man, now am I like a John Carpenter apologist now? Am I like?
I mean, because we're coming at this from a leftist perspective. Yes, you are.
I mean, I guess I'm saying like, if you're saying he was going off the direct source material for this movie, did he like know the We won't probably. I didn't see. I don't think I saw nothing about this where he talked about it specifically. Do you think he knew that this dude was writing this as like anti-communist propaganda? Or
I mean, we have in the last 5 to 10 minutes like made quite a progression to this being like legitimately it does sound strongly like that is the case, but I've read like a half a paragraph of the Wikipedia article on this fucking guy, so I'm not quite ready to lean in super hard that this was written explicitly to be like anti-Bolshevik. That being said, you know, we are used to the access to information that we have now. I like to forget that, you know, somebody like John Carpenter, who in probably 1979, 1980, who's starting work on this movie, couldn't just hop on Google, look up the author. Like,
Right.
he would have had to have been in the library, like doing deep dives to find out like the politics of this guy. And then when on top of that, you factor in the fact that he was approached to do the remake of the original movie, I don't think that there's a lot that points to John Carpenter having any sort of strong political leanings in this, or as much as he just thought it was a good story.
Yeah, that is more likely. You're right, though. He wasn't able to just. He could have read the original story, but how did he know? He would have had to then go back and read other articles that he's written in that magazine you just mentioned. What was it? The Stormship Troopers.
It was
Starship Troopers. Like,
oh wait, where was it? I don't know. Pretty fashy sounding name, but
The Starship Stormtroopers.
Oh, it's not that. Okay, not the doing. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, so he definitely was a
Starship Stormtroopers. Yeah,
I wonder if that's where Lucas got his name from. Probably so.
You could fully make the case that Carpenter made a. I don't know. You could tell me that he was fully right wing himself, very reactionary, and knew the politics of both the original short story and the intent of it and everything, and then tried to make another anti-communist movie in the early '80s, like just to be a good boy for the U.S. Like, and I would still say that he's unintentionally making a critique of individualism and its inadequacy against like a collective thing with a unified goal. It's like, and just the fact that he doesn't.
Nothing is more effective at like pointing out the problems with right-wing ideology than right-wing ideology.
Yeah,
Exactly.
let it play out, like let it come to its logical conclusions in any situation at all. But the fact that it doesn't like lionize the people who represent capitalism and just like order and the good Americans and everything, the fact that they all have like their flaws, they're all just like very human people, and then they don't conclusively win at the end. It's like that makes me think it's not such a clear cut 1-to-1. It's not like Animal Farm. It's not like a simple allegory for children. You know, it's like.
Yeah, I could definitely see, but you are right though. There's lots of these sort of right-wingy books or not, or then made to movies. Like it says that one of his influences was Heinlein, which is a well-known like anti-communist author. In his, he's the original Starship Troopers, which he was writing as like fascist like fanfic. So I wouldn't be shocked if he was. The other thing too is John Carpenter was just influenced by that time of being anti-communist, even if you didn't realize it yourself. It just like it bled into his movies.
I've had this conversation innumerable times, and probably with Mike at least once or twice. But like, there hasn't been a left in the U.S. in decades. And it's a lot of it is because of that. Like the anti-communist shit was so effective, especially like in the 70s and 80s when, we really were able to like effectively convince people that was like, the end times if we let the communists win. And with any sort of leftist movement in the U.S. like effectively squashed, like I'm not even sure what point I was trying to make, but just. Yeah, like it's hard. Oh, I know. It's just hard to fault someone in 1980 for maybe not understanding the full scope of the political spectrum because it had been destroyed. And again, like there was. It's not like you could start 8 meme pages and radicalize people. One at a time because Instagram keeps removing them, obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean, you had to make movies, and if you actually were left leaning trying to make those movies, one, they wouldn't let you, and two, if they did let you, they were then sanitized to where they would be palpable for the masses. I mean, there are only a few directors that I can think of, which I used to think of John Carpenter's writing kind of intentional, unintentional kind of subversive plots. But I think of like Oliver Stone's probably like one of the few actually writing anti-war movies and getting away with it pretty heavily. But other than that, I mean, it's
Like
not a big list.
I would say something good to look at for like the 70s and 80s, since we're discussing film, is the treatment of unions in cinema in that era. Because like at the time, it did not matter the context. If a union member or union boss or anything showed up in a movie, he was probably like that super corrupt, like maybe an enforcer, like mafia affiliated. Like there was a very like clear-cut image of who they wanted to portray unions as. And God, I wish I could remember where. There was a podcast where like I heard somebody talking about it, but they were specifically going out of their way to discuss like the few movies that they could think of that were moderately pro-union.
Norma
Well,
Ray.
honestly, what's that?
Norma Ray is one of the few.
Norma Ray was one that they talked
And
about.
Newsies.
Mate One, that one's like
Yeah.
from the 80s, I believe. But like for every one that you can think of that was pro, like there weren't a lot of whole movies that were entirely like there to just condemn and squash unions, but the general caricature of like a union member being like corrupt and lazy and so on and so forth was representative in God, an absolutely fucking enormous amount of movies.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, they weren't. Yeah, that's like a whole other thing, is like whether the people who actually were pro union and wanted to make those movies just like couldn't, because those aren't the movies that would that Hollywood wanted. They didn't want that message. I mean, Mike was just saying we're before, as a completely random mini tangent, is that we were talking about how so many Netflix shows get canceled after like 2 seasons. And my theory was just because, oh, well, it's cheaper to start a new show because, you know, you don't have to, it's just starting from scratch. But apparently Mike was saying it's because the union cost of the workers goes up.
Yeah, after 3 seasons, they say that it is rare for a show. Like it was unusual that things like Stranger Things have been renewed on Netflix for so many seasons, because they generally end it by season 3 because it becomes more cost prohibitive after that.
Yeah.
I had heard season 3. If it was season 2, I would believe that as well. But like,
I mean, Stranger Things is like probably an exception because it was so popular, and like it probably made them enough money to cover whatever
yeah,
they wanted to do. What was the other thing? I know we've like strayed from the movie, which I think is totally fair given the plot of the movie. But are there any, like, I don't know, being that you're both fans of this movie, what would you say like are some of your favorite scenes from this movie in terms
head
of
walking like a crab.
Yeah.
I unabashedly love this movie just for the effects. Like I am such a slut for practical effects like this, and they're so good. This is like the apex.
And it looks and they look great given the time.
Yeah.
Like they're movies that have come out in the last, like in the early 2000s, that have like aged to shit, where like you can't even watch the effects anymore. And meanwhile, this came out 41 years ago.
That really is the thing about it too. It's not even just that they're good effects, but like they're done so well that like when they show this creature in all the various different forms of like mutating into different things, and then different creatures come out, like at the end when he faces the final boss, it's like another of the dogs comes out of the middle of it, just like sprouts out of there. There's so many different like creature things sprouting out of it. It's just so creative that like they don't have to flash by it really quick. Like you can stare at this thing for like, you know, several slow frames of seconds at a time and still see a whole bunch of different horrifying things that really look human or like animal and organic in such a way, it's like, but then melted and horrifying. And they do a really good job of making that just really gross in a lot of ways, like the sliminess of it. Like yeah, they just do a really good job of that. And with the silicone or whatever they're using, it's very impressive that way.
again, something I saw him specifically discuss in an interview, and he brought up something that it never would have occurred to me if he didn't say it explicitly, and apparently that was all lighting. Um,
Huh.
he said that like if they had lit it differently, it would have either like if they had gone darker, obviously it would have lost a lot because there's such a vivid color palette to a lot of like these creatures too, and to darken it would have like really taken it away. But any lighter, and he was talking about how the brighter the lights were getting, like the more obviously it was a silicone prosthetic or a puppet or whatever. So apparently, like a lot of that was just dousing it in whatever the weird stuff that makes it look slimy is, and then lighting it just perfectly so that it's not too dark, but it's not bright enough to see that it's obviously a prop.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean he does. Yeah, his effects in pretty much all of his movies are pretty spot on. And then on the top of that, completely unrelated, is just always the scores for his movies, which he mostly does himself. So I think in this one he didn't write. This is like one of the few movies where he didn't score himself. I think I'd have to fact check that.
I thought he did, but I don't know.
You could be right. A music. Oh no, this one wasn't. It's by Ennio Morricone.
Okay.
But yeah, I think pretty much every other movie he's. I don't know why he decided he didn't want to do this one or whatever, or maybe he collaborated with him. I don't even know. But the I mean, I always love. I mean, I guess it's like I don't want to call it like the quintessential scene of the movie, but like the one that I feel like is the most tension filled is when they're doing like the paperclip and the blood. It's just a great scene. And there was a line that I noted down. I think it was I don't remember which character said it. And maybe you can remind me. I think it was Childs. At some point, he's like, because he's like super skeptical of like the idea of there being an alien. Like he's like the skeptic. I mean, I guess they're all kind of skeptical, but he's like the super skeptic. And he refers to like it being like some voodoo bullshit, and then he says something about like aliens, how they taught the Incas to build like things. And I was thinking about how this is like this trope you sometimes would see in movies where they assume that humans couldn't possibly have built the things they built because they needed like aliens to help them.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things, that when somebody starts talking some like ancient or ancient astronaut bullshit, I will immediately call that out as racist, and people are like, "What? How's that racist?" And it's I love it because it's one of the ones that you can convince people of the quickest, and it's just like, oh, because it's always about an African or South American civilization that people don't believe could possibly be advanced enough to move large pieces of stone, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's okay." Point taken.
Yeah, it's an easy to spot racist. That the literal words I wrote on my piece of paper was racist stereotype. So yeah, that's
the only exception, I guess, is Stonehenge.
Only because it's sort of it's still unknown.
Well, I mean, people just like assume that, like, I mean, I don't think it's unknown or anything, but people just like will still say that it's done by aliens or whatever because they're big pieces of stone or whatever, and that is in like England or whatever. Or where, I don't know where it is, but
yeah, it's like north of England.
Yeah, but I don't think
England,
that's that even. I feel like that's a less popular one to get chalked up to aliens because it's not that big. It's like not that impressive, I guess. I don't know.
Also, there's a popular idea for how the stones were moved around too. So,
I mean, I thought there was like, I was under the impression that all these feats of engineering that are attributed to aliens had been figured out by modern masons and engineers at this point, and that it was just crackpots who think it was anything else.
Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah.
I think it's more like people. I think now it's more like some people might be joking about it, but one thing that I noticed too, this is just another like completely random thing, is I think throughout the movie they're drinking American bourbon or whiskey, but I think there's like a scene towards the end where they're drinking Smirnoff, and I think it's like one of the last thing they're drinking. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They had some Smirnoff there, and I'm like, oh,
is J and B American?
I don't know what it is.
It's Scotch.
Oh, you're right. It's not American, is it? Well, do they drink Jack Daniels or no? Is it all
no, they drink J and B, and then he leaves the doctor in that tool shed with like another clear bottle of something, but I can't remember what it is. It was a white liquor, or I mean a clear liquor.
Oh,
So
I
maybe
think it was just
vodka.
at the end. What did I write?
And then Childs and Kurt Russell definitely both sip on Kurt's trusty bottle of JB at the end. Um,
Oh, so the part where he's drinking Smirnoff is when the doctor is doing like that computer like simulation of what the like the spreading of it and it creating it, and he's like
yeah.
getting like really stressed out. I think it's Blair, and then he starts taking drinks of Smirnoff, which I thought was funny because
Which I have to ask, did they have the computing power to do that? Like, and
no,
also,
I doubt it.
if they did, like, how did he write a program that afternoon
Yeah, dude.
to figure that out? That is
They they had a chess computer that could like barely function, and this dude's writing like high level scripts on his Apache. I don't know what the computers were exactly then. The
That was
Apple.
peak. Like, I mean, he did have like a much more beefy computer setup than Kurt Russell did for his little chess game. Like, he
That's
had
true.
that
He did.
wall of arrays or whatever he did, but like, still, that is very much a depending on the audience ignorance when you just say the word computer in 1982. And then, like, oh, yeah, of course, he can make that computer just theorize the entire world scenario of this virus or this alien. It's like, of course.
Well, but my thinking of it now as like this anti-communist movie, and he's figuring out how the alien is spreading, how the communism spreading, and then he's drinking Smirnoff. Like I feel like that couldn't have been like an accidental. I refuse to believe that was an accident, but I'm just
I like it.
I don't know. It could just be he's a Smirnoff guy. I don't know.
should have been Bankers Club or something.
No. The doc is Blair, the one who was drinking the Smirnoff. He's also the one who was infected, and they locked him in the shed, and they weren't sure that he was him or not. And they ended up building like a spaceship underneath it. That they're not aware of until he dies, right? Am I mistaken that?
No, it was Blair. They lock him in like the shed, right? And he sabotages all the computers and steals the like equipment, right, to build something.
So he is an alien. And so maybe was he an alien when he's drinking the fucking Smirnoff and running the simulations on his own? Or like, I guess when are we meant to think that he became an alien and started building that spaceship underneath? Or was it after they locked him in the tool shed?
Interesting.
Because
I have to
the whole
like
reason he flips out is because he's drinking too much. He sees the implications of having this thing and what it's going to mean for civilization. That's what he says. Like in his rant when he's like destroying everything, he's going nuts. Anybody who tries to stop him, he's like, I think at that point we're meant to believe that he arrives at the conclusion that all of them have to die. They have to burn everything down at that base because it's too late. And he says in his rants, he's like, if even a single cell gets back to civilization, it's going to subsume all of the world in a matter of like 72 hours or whatever it is. So it's like some kind of catastrophic thing. And so he's like firing a gun. He's like doing what he's like swinging the axe around. He's destroying everything. And they eventually subdue him and sedate him. And that's when they lock him in the tool shed. But then it makes me think that, yeah, he must have gotten murked by the thing while he was out in that tool shed and then started building his little tunnel and spaceship underneath it.
yeah, he wouldn't have gone on that whole rant if he had been the thing, presumably.
Yeah, it would want to. If anything, he would be like, I don't know. I think we should definitely get back as soon as we can. We should get somebody on the radio. Like, if that's the goal, then he really
Yeah. Right.
he
And
would
then like when he becomes a thing, he's like, damn it, I fucked this shit up. I had my chance. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah, like it's that whole like I think I tried to write down the rant. It says like the thing doesn't want us to show itself. It's like an imitation. I can't even read my own handwriting. I'm sure I could like look at the IMDb and see it. But yeah, like that whole he's like the only one who's really understands it. And then I feel like McCready just like kind of believes him. He just like realizes like, oh, this could be bad. And that's like right after that when like he basically becomes the de facto leader of the whole place. I believe. I think he like takes the gun from him and then the whole scene.
There's a very tense scene. Because there's that scene, like it's another good scene that's probably it's before even the paperclip scene you were talking about when they're starting to suspect each other and Gary, the guy with the gun, is kind of just known to be a hothead. He was the one who shot the Norwegian guy to begin with. He shot him through the window. He's just like, I'm not asking questions. I see these people shooting things out there, and he just shoots them. And
Honestly, if someone comes at me throwing hand grenades, I'm going to shoot them.
yeah, I mean, fair enough. But there is that tense scene where they start to try to decide who should even carry the gun and who they're going to trust is not the thing or not. And one of the kind of lesser known characters, he starts backing out of the room, runs for the emergency shotguns, and he's like, look, the guy who has the gun right now may be the thing. And you're all talking about following his orders. It's like, I don't know if any of you guys are the thing or not. And he's just like getting rightfully kind of paranoid. And they were suspecting him of being the thing up until that point. It's just like a really good scene that depicts the just everyone suspecting everyone. It's really good.
Yeah. That's just the whole. I saw some like Medium article where someone was writing about their like what the thing means, and they just referred to it just kind of like the idea of like paranoia of being stuck out in the middle of Antarctica and like you're not trusting anyone. I mean, I think that's probably true, but I think it goes
The
beyond.
thing is about the paranoia of being trapped in Antarctica with a bunch of Bolsheviks.
That I mean, that'd be cool as hell. They'd be doing some. They could organize a Norwegian camp or something.
I'm going to learn to direct so I can remake The Thing, but like instead of it being monsters, it's just actual communists. And they win.
Yeah, they could come. They come. They have if they get the single cell is just like the Communist Manifesto. If they just like bring the Communist Manifesto back to civilization, we all be good.
I love it.
But yeah, I think it is a indirect anti-communist movie, maybe. But now I want to like go down like the rabbit hole. I want to find like that dude. What was his name? John W. Campbell Jr. I want to find sort of his like his little origin content.
I did find that he was good friends with Heinlein.
Yeah, exactly. That's that. He may as well have been friends with like Hitler. Well, maybe that's a little too far, but yeah, and I'm also curious to know what the original story was, because I've done a few movie episodes where there's like source material, and generally speaking, I feel like it's been pretty good. Like Blade Runner, based on like the Philip Dick book, which is almost maybe even I wouldn't say it's better, it's different, but it's interesting. It'll be interesting. I should have done that homework before this was to read that little skim through it or something, but I don't know if you guys have any last thoughts on the movie or anything on it.
I'm just gonna forget that the last hour happened and continue enjoying this movie the same way that I always have, because I hate that it has become abundantly clear that this is probably actually anti-communist propaganda, inadvertently, possibly, but anti-communist propaganda nonetheless.
And I'm going to walk away from it with a newfound enjoyment, knowing that The Thing is as unstoppable as the immortal science, and the fact that it was written by a fucking chud doesn't make any difference, because they always unintentionally arrive at communism by a different name, and they just usually exclude people that they don't like because they're always giving away their own insecurities. But yeah, they always just kind of arrive at the fact that they're wrong and that communism is inevitable anyway. It's just a matter of time.
I have found like whole paragraphs of this guy arguing, quote unquote, devil's advocate about how slavery actually was good for black people.
Yeah.
So this is the person we're dealing with.
So is the thing like the specter of communism? Is that what we're saying now?
Honestly, just reading about this guy, The Thing is probably the specter of interracial marriage for all I fucking know. Like,
dick.
this dude's not cool.
Yeah, this guy is a questionable, checkered.
He was questionable when I started reading about him. At this point, he is just a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah. So the book, or like the story, is called Who Goes There?
Yeah.
So it was printed in so obviously it was printed as The Thing from Another World, which was the original movie. But it seems like it was just like a very short story, like only, I don't know how long exactly it is, but there is a lot of information about this. I didn't look at the entire Wikipedia about it, but it seems like, and actually says that they based there's an episode of X-Files where they find like something in the ice. I think the episode was called Ice, and it's actually loosely based on this book too. It seems like there's a lot of
I watched that episode like 2 weeks ago.
oh, I love X-Files.
Yeah.
There's an episode apparently of Deep Space Nine from Star Trek, The Adversary, where it's loosely based on this, although you could say like the idea of there being a shape-shifting alien infiltrating a crew probably all came from this at some point, whether you intentionally or not kind of thing. So
I mean, it's honestly, it's a good trope. It's a good
Very.
like vehicle for building suspense and mistrust. Like, God, what was that fucking game that everyone was obsessed with like 2 years ago?
Among Us.
Among Us. Yeah, like, God, that whole video game is probably based on this fucking short story.
although I actually just learned on Tuesday we were talking about Parasite with the guys from Intervention podcast, and apparently the person who wrote The Last of Us, was that what you're just talking about or no?
No, Among Us is a video game where you have to
okay.
figure out who.
Same thing though.
I was
Infectious
confusing
zombie.
Okay.
Yeah, I was confusing it, but I learned that The Last of Us apparently was written by a guy who was like a Zionist and was creating it as like a Palestinian versus Israeli conflict,
Cool.
which really just fucking destroyed that show for me.
That sucks.
I just didn't think the show was that interesting anyway, except for the one best gay episode ever.
I mean, I think it was good, but that definitely kind of puts a little stain on it. But I know, I think you're right. Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you could maybe say is somewhat similar-ish to, let's say similar, but has a similar trope from this. Actually, I think it says that someone claims, and like Alien, right? I mean, that's another similar thing. But yeah, it is a good trope, and it does make a good movie. And I don't know, I'm going to come away from this still liking this movie, but I'm now going to, assume that the thing is communism from now on.
And in the grand scheme of making content, I really appreciate that we came upon all of this information like on recording.
On the fly, I love it.
And like we're like, oh, none of us researched this at all. What are we going to come up with? And it was just a hot garbage.
Well, that's
That was all right.
That's definitely my fault. It's funny. I was thinking of this movie. I'm like, this is it's a fun movie. I like this movie. It's a horror movie. Talk about, it's about communism. Not thinking much about it. Not doing much more beyond like what Carpenter said about it. And then I think I just slipped my mind that it was based on this short story, which I'm glad that we stumbled upon it at minute 20 of this episode to bring you on the fly fact checking. And John Carpenter would not have been able to do this if he in 1982 or 81 when he was making this movie.
Yeah, I still in my heart of hearts, either I'm deluding myself or not, I don't know. But I kind of feel like John Carpenter's probably not a shitty dude. Like,
no, I don't think so. He seems like a genuinely good person. He's not. And the same thing too. Like he could sell out and make like hot garbage movies for probably big money, but he makes the movies he wants to make, and I don't know. I got to respect him for that.
Actually, I will throw in one thing though. Didn't he direct Escape from LA?
He did.
Yeah, let's not forget that basically Che Guevara was the villain in that movie.
Oh fuck! You're right. I'm supposed to do that movie in like a couple weeks. Fuck. Well, now, I mean that's fair. I mean, and then actually Escape from New York, which I did do, but the audio got lost, and I wasn't able to publish it. But that movie is pretty much good. It's very like the whole thing is like they need to get a box so that they can prevent like nuclear war between Russia, Soviet Union, and the United States.
Yeah, I actually think that in Escape from LA, the choice to make the character so much like Che Guevara was aesthetic more than symbolic.
Possible.
Because like they really don't delve into ideology for that character very heavily, and it's basically just like a almost kind of remake of Escape from New York, which both function as acutely like you maybe not anti-capital, but at least critical of like modern systems, like
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Escape from New York is very satirical in the way that it describes like the police state that's that like what we're. I feel like that's more on the line of like They Live than maybe this movie, which different kind of movie, different action versus like a horror style.
I think if John Carpenter has a crime, it's the very frustrating thing of like trying to critique something while having no ideology to like present as an alternative. Like there's nothing more infuriating to me than anymore like at this point in my life. Like I have so many friends who like want to criticize capitalism and I'm like, okay, you're halfway there, but you're rejecting the rest of it. So what the fuck is your point?
That's the problem with so many. I say this in a couple episodes on sort of anti-capitalist movies where there's kind of a revolutionary spirit, but then there's no. These movies never present any kind of actual alternative. They're just like, this is bad. We should stop it, but we don't know what to do. There's nothing we can do about it.
And also the alternatives that have been tried are just as scary as we know, according to the capitalists that we agree are bad.
Right. So it's the constant movie. You don't get too many movies where there's actually a revolutionary spirit and then actual successful next steps.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna.
And if they do, it's like anarcho-syndicalism.
Yeah.
What movie is that?
No, I'm just saying, like, they will never call it that, but it's always like they end up in like the Shire or something. They just get right to the end.
Oh,
the
okay.
bad guys are already gone, and they can just do their commune, but they don't ever have to like defend it. You know what I mean? They'll never have to like keep it there.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
I actually, in all fairness, to go back to it, there was the one episode of what was the show we were just talking about? The Last of Us. There's the one episode where like they show up to like a community, and the people are like, "Oh, so you're communists?" And they're like, "Oh no, it's not quite like communism." And the one person that lives there is like, "Actually, yes, it's exactly like that."
Yeah, the leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they don't want to believe that what they like the life that they finally needed was communism because it like even like after the apocalypse, they're still like rejecting the idea of communism, which is pretty comical actually.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, I mean, I live in one of the most oppressive police states that you can possibly imagine. I've recently had to murder a child because they were infected by a disease, maybe. But I don't know, man. This communism that you guys seem to be living really happily under is kind of suspicious to me. I'm gonna go."
Oh man, yeah. But yeah, so
like you guys all seem really happy, but at what cost?
He did the thing.
Oh, my favorite line.
It's one of my favorite lines to use as a joke.
I feel like that should be like the Wall Street Journal, like the Financial Times, like underscore. It should just be like the Financial Times, but at what cost? That's literally like every article that's in the Financial Times or Wall Street Journal about China is just like they're cured cancer, but is that good? Like that literally was like an article from like 6 years ago, which I feel like always goes around.
And 5 years ago, and 4 years ago, and 3 like.
All right. Well, we may have exhausted our thing take, but anyone out there, I think you can still enjoy this movie. You're allowed to. It's a great movie.
It's a good movie.
It's a thriller.
Sci-fi / horror movie.
It's fun. It's not boring. It's not lame. It is a dude fest.
It is a dude fest. I don't think there is literally a single female character in there,
or even a mention of a female character.
Yeah,
both the black guys do survive, like up until pretty much the very end. Like Knowles is one of the last ones to go. He's actually the last one to go. Before Kurt Russell kills the big boss monster, and then ends it with the last scene with Keith Richards. Keith David, not Keith Richards. Him.
That would be
he would have survived.
Movie.
He would have survived.
Yeah, and like honestly, like I think that if maybe I'm grasping at straws because I like John Carpenter, but I don't feel like if he was a real piece of shit that like one of the last two living characters was going to be one of the black characters.
Right, because like given like the common trope of like killing the black character basically first.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, this movie again it's one of my favorite horror movies, ever, and so it is what it is. It's a movie that's maybe anti-communist, but fuck it.
I like Mike's take. It's pro-communist just on accident because anti-communists are idiots.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that should be everyone's takeaway. But Mike and Brandon, thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I know you. I mentioned at the beginning you both have podcasts. Did you want to, briefly say what your podcasts are so people who don't know might check it out?
Sure. Yeah, I'm on Cars and Comrades. We're pretty niche. Like, I feel like a lot of people like movies. Not as many leftists like working on their cars, but we talk about a lot of labor history in the automotive industry, and news. We make fun of Elon Musk quite a bit because it's just so easy, and just generally bullshit about our cars and our projects and stuff. But it's fun. We enjoy it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, mine is Turn Leftist podcast. We're not as niche as that. We don't talk about just cars. We didn't pigeonhole ourselves. Then we just talk about anything Marxist. But we also are not really doing much lately. But there's a good back catalog. So if you haven't checked us out, go check out any of the other 100 episodes we did. So
Awesome. Yeah, and I like I like that series, Brendan, on the Ralph Nader. So if you don't know anything about Ralph Nader, he seems like a pretty decent dude. I like that.
Still another person I wish could just acknowledge that there actually is an answer that isn't capitalism.
just grow us head. Come on, bro.
Yeah.
It's like he's so close, but he can't. It's like he can't do it. But
Yeah.
he seems like a good guy. Anyway.
But within the framework with which he was willing to work, he did good stuff. So
yeah.
And we did like a 7-part series with Turn Leftist on Walter Reuther too.
Yeah.
That was fun.
It was good.
Awesome. Well, so you've been listening to Left of the Projector. You can find us anywhere podcasts are found. Like and give a rating. Those are good for algorithms and such. So thanks everyone for listening and have a good one.
Thanks again.
All right.